We will call the meeting of the Joint Ag Committee back to order. And we're going to take a small deviation from our agenda for just a little bit of housekeeping. First, I'd like to address a little bit of the confusion we had this morning. We were voting by raising our hands because the rules we adopted, we needed a majority of both houses to conduct business. There was some confusion on that. And so I just wanted to read you the rule that we're following, that we have adopted, so that we're clear going forward. I know this is our last interim meeting. However, we'll be using these rules next year as well. So under D1, the quorum necessary for the joint interim committee to transact any business shall be a majority of the members from each house who are appointed to serve on the committee. So that is the rule that we adopted, that we are operating under. And the reason that our amendments require a majority from both houses as well. Are there any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, we've got that all cleared up. We thank you for our good staff who's always looking out for our back. We're all learning because I'm fairly new at this, and my good co-chairman is as well. So we appreciate everyone looking out for us, and we are figuring this out as we go along. With that, I've asked Mr. Magagna from the Stock Growers to come and share a concern he has with us from the State Loan and Investment Board. And I'm sure he will be brief to keep us on schedule, but I think it's an issue of importance to this committee. And so we would love to hear from you, Mr. Magagna. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and appreciate this brief opportunity. And I will be brief. Just a little bit of background in case you're not familiar with it. The Farm Loan Program has two components to it. Historically, it was a program to make loans to agricultural producers at a fixed interest rate, which for many years has been 8%. And then about 15 years ago, we were successfully added a second component to make loans to beginning farmers and ranchers, and that's defined in the regulations at a rate of 3% for up to 10 years. And then at the end of 10 years, it would go up to the rate for the other loans, the 8%. Historically, there was $200 million made available by the legislature for that purpose. And then during the crisis of the 80s, the mid-1980s, the demand actually exceeded that, and an additional 70 million was authorized. So there was a total of 270 million. In recent years, with low interest rates, of course, that hasn't been used. Currently, the Beginning Farmer Rancher Program, I believe, has just slightly over $15 million out in loans. The regular program has almost nothing. I think 3 loans is all that have been carried forward, because as private rates became cheaper than the 8%, people refinanced with the private sector. And as an industry, I think I can say, and certainly for us at Stock Growers, we've always looked at this program as a safety net. There have been efforts by the legislature sometimes to reduce that 8%. We've resisted those, saying, no, we don't want to compete with the private sector. We want to be there when the rates in the private sector are not affordable. Anyway, this past legislative session, a couple of changes were made that were significant. Because not much of the money was being used, about 15 million currently, the legislature saw fit to reduce that 270 million down to 50 million that's available. The idea being that because the rest of those dollars wouldn't be committed to this program, they could be invested longer term by the state treasurer at a greater return to the state. And then along with that, they changed the 8% to being a rate that is tied to private, or not private sector, but to right, yes, that's what I didn't get those right words, but that's correct. And then the same on the Beginning Farmer Rancher Program, the same thing. So as a result of the legislative changes, just today, based on private sector interest rates, the rate on a farm loan, regular farm loan, would be just slightly over 7%. The rate on a beginning loan would still be much lower initially. the Office of State Lands Investments that manages this program, and the decisions, of course, are made by the Board of State Loan Investment Board, has concerns that with the 50 million and with the interest rates in the private sector going up, that there will be more demand for these loans and that they might run up against that 50 million cap that exists today. Our position has been that if you begin to reach that cap, we'll come back to the legislature and advocate for an additional allocation of funds. But what they're proposing to the board, to the State Loan Investment Board, to be considered for a vote day after tomorrow at a special meeting of the board, that's significant is two things. First, that they will not recommend any farm loans of the regular loans to be approved by the board unless the interest rates at the commercial level exceed 18%. Well, if we get to 18% interest rates, we're all in a lot of trouble. But our concern is that by setting that high, there will simply be no more loans made under the regular loan program, because I hope we don't get to 18% in the private sector. Their second recommendation is that for beginning farmer and rancher loans, that they would continue to make those loans, but that in analyzing the creditworthiness of the borrower to be able to pay that loan back, they would calculate that based on the first 10 years being at whatever rate the loan is made at, and any additional years beyond the 10 years being at a rate of 20% annually. And that 20% requirement, in our view, is going to disqualify a lot of beginning farmers and ranchers from being able to get these loans, because trying to prove that 10 years from now you're going to be able to afford 20% interest is going to be pretty challenging. So those two factors are a concern of ours. We'll be raising this issue with the Loan Investment Board on Thursday morning when they meet, but I wanted to make this committee aware of it, because in our view, this goes very contrary to having a program that's intended to help the ag community when they really are in need of help. And with that, Madam Chair, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McGagna. Are there any questions, Senator Ide?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McGagna, thanks for being here today. Always good to listen to you. Can you explain on that, that 10 years, or that's on a new borrower basically, and then they get a cut rate on the interest rate. What are the amortizations on those loans? Are they fixed to that 10 years, or are they out 20 years or 30 years? Could you explain that? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair and Senator Ide, I believe there's some flexibility in the amortization. I mean, they're 10 years at the lower interest rate, but they all provide the ability to be extended beyond that. Now, whether I'll have to be honest with you, I'm not certain whether some of them are initially issued for a longer period of time, or it's simply they're issued for 10 years with the understanding that if you met your obligations in 10 years, you can extend it at the higher interest rate.
Okay, any further questions? All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
McGagna. At this time, I would like to direct staff to reach out to our fiscal staff and find out how the bill we passed last year worked. I believe it was a cap fin bill, and see if that cap would apply past the 10 years on the interest rate, and then we can move forward with that and see how to proceed. That was a cap fin bill. I still serve on that committee, so we need to make sure that's raised at the next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks. So any further additional comments on that topic? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for the indulgence. We'll proceed on to the elk management. So we would like to have Anna come up and present the bill we have before us, and then we'll hear from the Game and Fish Commission, or the Game and Fish Department, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. This bill draft is entitled 24 LSO 114 Excess Wildlife Population Damage Amendments. The bills change pretty drastically from what we saw at the September meeting, so I'll go over it fairly carefully. In the middle of page 2, extraordinary damage to rangeland is included in the type of damage that Game and Fish can compensate landowners and lessees for. Furthermore, the Game and Fish Commission is authorized to establish by rule methods, factors, and formulas to be used for determining the amount to compensate a landowner or lessee for extraordinary damage to rangeland. And then at the bottom of page 2, or actually the bottom of page 3, there's a definition of extraordinary damage to rangeland. It also should be presumed that extraordinary damage to rangeland has occurred if the consumption of forage exceeds 15% of the estimated total annual production of forage in the year damage is claimed, or if the population estimate of any big game herd on the rangeland exceeds the population objective established by the commission for 2 or more consecutive years. The department may rebut either of those presumptions based on the facts of an individual claim. And then amounts to compensate a landowner or lessee shall be based on the animal unit months or AUMs payable to the state for state trust lands, or a multiplier of not less than 150% of the private land lease rate for the affected area. And then section 2 is a rulemaking section, and section 3 provides for a split effective date. And I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that. Are there any questions? Representative Conrad.
Madam Chair, thank you. Anna, what is the financial or fiscal impact of this? Is there any values assigned?
Madam Chairman, Representative Conrad, I'm not sure what the fiscal impact is yet because we can't put it through a fiscal note until probably mid-November or so. So I'm not sure what the fiscal impact is at this time. Game and Fish might have an answer for you, but I'm not sure if they know at this point.
Okay. At this time, I would like to invite Co-Chairman Craigo, since he chaired the committee that worked on this, if he has any comments or any additional input on the bill. And I want to thank both you and your committee for taking a deep dive on this and doing the work of the committee for us on this important bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And so I don't have a whole lot to add to LSO's presentation, other than I would just note the subcommittee that you assigned to work on this worked not only with the Stock Growers Association and Game and Fish, but the 4 of us on the committee also, spent some time, had 3 different meetings, I believe, between our last meeting and this one, and kept working. And each time the draft changed a little bit more to get it to where we are now. And so, I think it's workable. I know we'll hear from the department, but it's workable on their end. I also think that it satisfies or meets the goals that we were trying to from, the property landowner's perspective as well. And so that's all I would add. As far as the actual language, I think we'll hear from not only Mr. Magagna, but we'll hear from a couple of folks from the department that can actually address that and why they think it's doable on their end, and how it does meet the goals, which were twofold. One is it moves us towards more effective management of the elk herd, but 2, also in the meantime, these in particular in areas where the elk are overpopulated, we're going to compensate the landowners for that additional burden on their land. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions from the committee for either Co-Chairman Craigo or our Anna? Senator Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just probably need help to work me through this here. Get on Romanet through a page around here, page 4, and about under the amounts to be compensated a landowner. Well, anyway, I guess I'm looking at this and it says or a multiplier of not less than 150% of the private land lease rate for the affected area as established by the United States Department of Agriculture for private land. If you tell me how this actually works, give me an example of how this works, because it appears that you're going to make more money off of a said damage claim than you paid for a land lease. I mean, I'm unsure of how this would work in a practical way. could you kind of run me through a scenario, a simple one that for compensation under that scenario? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Co-Chairman Craigo, I think he will answer that for us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And so the purpose behind that language, Senator Kolb, was on state lands, it's what you would pay for the state land. Because we run into some sublease issues there, constitutional issues actually on that. And so we did not want to affect that. But the reason the subcommittee came up with the not less than 150% on the private land is as a rancher, yes, the AUM, whatever it's worth is what, let's say it's $30 a month, for example. That's what you would pay if you were going out into the market to run on somebody else's land. So that's the private value. The problem is that doesn't encompass the profit loss on not being able to run on your own land. And so that was the point. I mean, that was the idea behind the 150% figure in there, was we're trying to compensate for the loss because you're not able to run your own land or run cattle on your own land. And so maybe you could go out and run somewhere else, I suppose, but the idea is you're not being able to run on your own land because of the reduction in AUMs due to the overpopulation.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
So if I get this right, you got a 15% damage to your land from the other animals over foraging. And with a 15% damage, you claim 100% of the loss of the I guess of what you're leasing. So the lease, you're not paying anything for the property you're releasing. If I'm saying this right, because of a 15% loss in forage. I'm trying to get the mechanics down of how this would actually function. Like, you claim a loss at the very minimum, 15%. What benefit does that then give you? I mean, it seems like just in a cursory look that it's free grazing. You don't pay anything for those grazing rights. I mean, what the compensation package, I mean, I'm sure you're very familiar with this because you devised it, but this compensation package that you're 150% of paying the damage claim, 150% of what? 150% of the grazing costs? I'm trying to understand this at the level you do.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Vice Chairman.
Co-Chair.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Kolb. So first of all, the committee devised it. I was part of the committee. But what I would say is the 150% is a set number. That is going 150% of the statistical AUM for that particular year, which is a number that the state calculates. They will have that calculation already because they use that to devise their state land charges on any given year. So that's not some number that the rancher comes up with. That is a number that the state would already have. So then it's 150% of that per AUM lost. So however many AUMs they lost, which is also a calculation, which I think if we wait just a few minutes, it'll become more clear because the department has a presentation to provide that will show us where that comes from. It's going to be easier to see on a piece of paper than me trying to explain it.
All right, does that satisfy you until they come up? Okay. Any further questions? All right. Thank you so much. And we'll have the department come up next and give us all of the statistics we're looking for and walk us through your part of the bill. Thanks for joining us here today on this beautiful Halloween day. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you. Members of the committee, my name is Rick King. I'm Chief Game Warden and Chief of the Wildlife Division, and with me is Deputy Chief Craig Smith, also from the Wildlife Division. And I would like to start by thanking you all for the opportunity to work with the subcommittee in drafting the bill that's before you. We did spend quite a bit of time with that committee, and I feel like while the bill may still have some work that could be done, it is in a pretty good spot for us, and I think it's in a place where it's workable for the department to incorporate it into our working damage claim process. So With that, would it be appropriate for me to stand for any questions first, or would you prefer that I maybe talk through how we might handle a claim under this bill?
Mr. King, I think talking us through how you would handle a claim would be most beneficial.
Okay, thank you. So what we would envision under this bill is that if a particular ranch had a number of elk on the place that were in their upland or rangeland pastures, that they could call and notify the Game and Fish Department of that damage. We would respond and investigate. We would start a damage claim process with the landowner. We would conduct counts of the elk that are on the place and continue to monitor that damage until those elk left and the damage ended. During that time frame, of course, we'd try to mitigate the damage as best we could through hunting seasons and hazing, et cetera. But at the end of the year, we would sit down with the producer, and they would be able to file a damage claim under this bill for those that lost forage from those elk. That the calculation would be fairly straightforward, just the number of elk, how long they were there, and we would convert that to AUMs or animal unit months, and then settle up with them in terms of a payment based on that AUM rate. And the AUM rate that's referred to in this bill would be we'd use the basis as the USDA ag statistics that are collected on a monthly basis for the entire state. So it'd be pretty easy for us to go to that, find out what the fair market rate is for an AUM, and pay based on our counts and observations of elk that are converted to AUMs. I think the discussion about the paying for 150% of that rate would be that's a little outside of what our damage claim process currently provides for. Currently in our damage program, we pay the straight going rate, not 150% of it, but it would be fairly straightforward for us to incorporate this into our damage program. Again, just multiplying the going rate based on USDA ag statistics by 150%. So in short, this is fairly workable for us. It will require some work in rules and regs, and I appreciate the latitude in this bill to allow us to work through that. I think, as you all know, a good process creates good policy, and having that ability to work through some nuances through rules and regs and provide some additional input from landowners and others will help us refine and shape this and make sure it's implemented to the legislature's intent.
All right. Are there any questions? Okay, we're going to start with Senator Ide, and we'll go to the end of the table. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to clarify that the AUM rate published by the USDA, that would be on private property purely. Correct?
Madam Chair, Senator Ide, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Allemond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you guys for being here today. If a rancher sees way too many elk on his problem or on his place, and he says, I got a problem. I've got to move my cows to private somewhere else. So he moves his cows 100 miles away. He pays the trucking, he pays a couple months of rent, and then all of a sudden the elk are gone. He's not going to receive near what he lost when you pay AUMs while the elk are there. How are we going to rectify a problem like that? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think that like Representative Crago mentioned, that was the impetus behind the 150% was to try to cover some of those costs that are hard to quantify just in an AUM payment. I think that was the intent of the 150% of the going AUM rate. And like I mentioned, that is different. Our current damage program doesn't provide for those kind of additional costs that are out there. Our current damage program just compensates for the actual damage and not some of that collateral damage that may, or expenses that occur.
All right. Senator Cole.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman. Do you have a real life example you could give? I mean, I'm not a rancher. I don't run cattle. So could you help me understand what this really means? Because this is all, something that certainly I don't know anything about. Could you give an example of a ranch and then say if it had 15% damage, what are you exactly going to claim under that scenario with the 150% compensations? We're going to use that as an example. Could you help me with that, please? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb. So an example, maybe just to keep it simple, let's say that Deputy Smith has a large pasture. It's 1,000 acres. We can come up with a rough estimate of how much forage that pasture should provide. And what we would do is we would work with the producer to come up with that estimate of the total forage that pasture should provide on a normal year. And then based on the elk counts, we would come up with an estimate of how much forage the elk are taking off of that pasture that are no longer available to the producer. The 15% would be subtracted out of that, and then the department would pay the remainder of those AUM costs that were lost to elk consumption that are no longer available to the producer for his livestock, his or her livestock. It would be so the estimates are fairly straightforward. An estimate of forage production on a pasture, and then an estimate of elk consumption based on the number of elk that are there and how long they were there.
Follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, let me try this again. So I'm talking for the general public now. I need numbers. It's $1,000. It's $20,000. It's $5,000. Something like that. Work together a scenario where Director Smith here has so many head of animals that have a forage impact of a negative amount. What does that mean in real numbers?
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb. So I apologize. I do have a quick presentation that I shared with the subcommittee, but I didn't share it with LSO. I think if there was a way to quickly set that up, I'd be happy to share that. Would that be? Again, I apologize. I should have sent it to them ahead of time, but I did not.
Let's check in with staff and see, would that be possible if we pause for just a moment to
Like
get
an email.
that presentation to our staff, and we'll let them see if we can do that. While we're working on that, maybe we can continue further discussion if anyone has any other questions while we get that presentation up. Okay, Representative Schlegel, thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment in general on the Senator Kolb seems to be concerned with the 15%. I want to explain that 15%. 15% is what the subcommittee or task force came up with, as that's the amount the elk are going to probably be able to take off of a place, and you don't consider that normal or extraordinary loss. So if you have damages, the 15% will come off the top, and then anything above that is what gets paid. So it's 15% is automatically considered use by the game and fish on even private land is where we're coming from with that. If that makes sense.
All right, we'll pause for just a moment and see if we can get that presentation up. I might ask our deputy director a question while we're working on that. And that is, do you have any idea of what kind of fiscal note you might be looking at with this bill? And then I'm assuming it's coming out of your regular budget and how that might impact the agency. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as an estimate right now, we do not have a fiscal impact estimate. If this bill was to pass as is, we can certainly, once this is in a form that's acceptable to everyone, we can certainly develop that. As far as our regular budget, all of the funding that goes towards paying damage claims is generated through license sales application fees that comes directly out of the commission budget. There is no general fund appropriations made for this, so it all comes out of the Game and Fish Fund. And as far as an amount, it would certainly on the surface look like it will increase our payments to landowners, and we just don't have a great idea on what that amount might be right now.
Thank you for that. We'll do a check-in with staff. Are we able to get that presentation up? Thank you so much for being nimble for our committee and being able to adapt, improvise, and overcome. So just let us know when you're ready.
Okay, so this is an example that we used with the subcommittee. So we just selected a property that's a wildlife habitat management area south of Rollins and north of Baggs. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. So within that property, there's a large pasture. It's about 5,300 acres. That's that red outline that you can see there. This is pretty typical 7,000 foot elevation, mixed shrub, grass type habitat or pasture. Next slide. So again, like I said, it fairly standard Wyoming mid elevation type pasture. Next slide. So what we proposed using was the NRCS has a great tool called the Range Analysis Platform, or RAP. It uses a lot of satellite imagery data and other data that you can produce an estimate of the forage production on a given place. And so using that tool, we came up with an estimate that that pasture would produce about 522 pounds of forage per acre. Under most good stewardship rules or procedures, a producer would look to take about 50% of that off and leave 50%. So that would leave 261 pounds per acre of forage available for the producer. If you times the acres by the 261 pounds per acre, you come up with about 1.4 million pounds of available forage. This particular pasture is grazed with yearlings. And so just running through those numbers, 850 head of yearlings eating about 15 pounds of forage per day over that time period would take off roughly 471,000 pounds of forage. Next slide, please. So again, going back to the total estimate of the available forage, if we had a hypothetical scenario where 300 head of elk showed up onto that pasture and they stayed there for 3.5 months, we could come up with a solid estimate of how much forage they've taken off. So 300 head of elk consuming about 13 pounds per head per day would be 3,900 pounds per day, times 105 days would be about 409,000 pounds of forage. Subtract 15% off the total available, that equates to 208,000. We would subtract that from what the elk consumed, and the remaining portion would be what would be compensated to the producer, which is about 200,000 pounds of forage lost. Converting those to AUMs would be 268 AUMs at the fair market rate right now, which is roughly $30 per AUM. That would translate to about $8,000 in a damage payment.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. Senator Cole, do you have any other questions on that, or did we satisfy your curiosity there?
Madam Chair, it's a lot to take in. I just looked at it for the first time. I'd prefer a mathematical equation, frankly, that would be much simpler for me. I'm a math guy. So just give me an equation. I love equations. And so I'm a little unsure, Madam Chair, to be honest with you. I haven't had enough time to really study it.
All
But-
right.
But thank you for the presentation. It does give some more light to this, but thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Almond.
This is more of a comment than a question. Up here, we used the figure of $30 per acre, but we're in reality talking about what the game and fish would be paying is $45 an acre because that's 1.5. So that instead of it being 8,000, it'd be 12,600. Am I correct in thinking that?
That is,
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Almond, that's correct. You'd take $8,000 and times it by 1.5 and yeah, somebody that is a math guy, 12,000 sounds about right.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Good catch. Good job, committee. All right. Is there any further questions for the Game and Fish? Go ahead, Representative Schlegel.
Just one comment. I just want to give Mr. King credit for that. That was the example we used before we changed the bill to say 150% would be times. So this example that we just saw was before that addition to our bill. And so that wasn't his fault because he didn't have a chance to update it after that. But and I think it, and I don't know if there's really any questions for him, but I felt when working on the task force with them, I felt this was kind of a win-win situation for both the producers and the game and fish in this situation. I mean, yeah, it looks like a lot of money and they talked about it a little bit, but basically this compensation is going to be coming out of their license fee sales and that sort of thing. It's not coming out of their general budget. So it shouldn't be a direct hit on the state having to put out more money for compensation, if I understand right.
Madam Chair, Representative Schlegel, you're correct in that the department currently through the revenue that we receive from licenses, we set aside a certain amount of money out of application fees to cover our damage program. Right now, that's dictated by statute. That the amount that we set aside right now is about $500,000. That doesn't cover all the damage expenses. And so then we just use other license revenues to cover the additional annual damage program expenses. But that entire damage program is funded through Game and Fish Commission dollars that largely are received entirely by license fee revenues. There is no general fund used to pay damage claims.
All right. Seeing no further, one more from Senator Cole. Go ahead.
So under that scenario, Madam Chair, under the scenario, it's a $12,000 payout, not an $8,000 payout, in approximate numbers. Okay. So I guess, how much money is in your damage claims account typically? I mean, what do you currently run in that account? And then secondarily, do they have to run animals in this affected land? Say you have what is it, 1.4 million pounds of forage at the 50% level. Do you have to have animals on there to then weigh against how much total was lost as a damage claim? So you can't just do it without having animals on said property, like cattle or whatever it may be that are consuming the feed, the forage. Could you explain that?
Go ahead.
Sure. Madam Chair, Senator Culp. So starting with your first question. So right now by statute, we do set aside money from license application fees to maintain a pot of money for our damage program. Right now that equates to about $500,000, but our annual damage program has been costing us more in the neighborhood of $1 to $1.5 million over the last several years. So we use other Game and Fish Commission revenue to cover that expense. And again, that's all license fee. The Game and Fish Department is self-funded. The department doesn't receive any general fund money, so it's all covered through license fees. To address the second part of your question, there could be scenarios where a producer rotates their pastures, and so they may have several pastures, and one pasture is rested 1 year. That's for rangeland health, and if elk get into that pasture and consume that forage, that could still be considered damage, even though they're not running livestock in there as part of their program. It would be still viewed as potentially damage that we would pay for. Does that answer your second question?
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Representative Davis, you've been so patient with us. Thank you for waiting. And we'll go to you now.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If my memory serves me correctly, we were not only talking about rangeland, weren't we talking about crop damage? Has there been any thought, I'm pretty sure the elk don't necessarily just like grass, but they do like annual crops also. So is there a formula that is talked about here? Thank you.
Go ahead, Chief.
So, Madam Chair, Representative Davis, so our current damage program does contemplate growing crop damage, and we have an extensive program to evaluate and pay damage claims for growing crops like hay and corn and other growing crops and stored crops. The new part of this bill is that extraordinary damage to rangeland, those rangeland pastures that up to this point really haven't been compensated under our damage program. So to answer your question, we've been paying for growing crop damage for a long time. That is an extensive part of our current damage program. This new addition creates an opportunity for a producer to be compensated for that rangeland forage that to this point has not been compensated.
Thank
Do you
you,
have a follow-up?
Madam Chair.
All right.
That clears up a lot of stuff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess I have a question. Do you anticipate you'll need more employees to enforce this? Or do you usually go up in the high range and look at this type of situation?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Larson, I do think this will create an additional workload for our folks, but our department is well positioned right now to make sure that we can address that workload. I think one point that I would make is that the example that I showed used the NRCS RAP program, which is a really good way to come up with a reliable, repeatable estimate that won't be a significant workload burden for our folks. And if we can use a tool like that and that's acceptable to producers, that'll go a long way to ensuring that we can adequately cover this program. If we went down the road of providing really nuanced methodologies that were very, very site specific, that could create some workload issues that could be untenable if we had to go out to every place and establish cages, for example, and clip and weigh production. That could quickly take us to a place that's untenable. But if we're able to, through rule and reg, use something like I just showed you today, the department will be able to handle that workload.
All right, follow up.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I have a couple. So will they need to be going out and counting the number of head, like weekly?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Larson, we would establish regular counts. We currently do that. So for example, if you had a growing alfalfa field right now, between producer counts and our department counts, we would use those to establish that payment baseline. And this program would be no different in that we would need to be out there on a regular basis. Now we are trying to use new technologies. We don't have anything perfected, but cameras and other means could help us reduce that actual on the ground physical workload. And we hope to incorporate more of that, but it would require us to be out there on the ground getting regular counts.
Okay, one more, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Also, can you explain to me, I'm not sure the meaning of this part of, on page 4, line 1, where it says, or if the population estimate of any big game herd on the rangeland for which the damage is claimed exceeds the population objective established by the commission for 2 consecutive years. So does that automatically bring that area in, if a guy just made a claim?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Larson, I believe that was the intent of the committee, was that in any place where our elk herd is above the commission's objective, that would be a default basis for a damage claim.
Man, I hate to keep,
Go ahead.
I hate to keep asking questions. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So in this, I think it's the Laramie herd we've been talking about for a long time. I assume there's lots and lots and lots of acres. Are they automatically put in if that rancher wants them in?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Larson, so yes, I would envision, for example, Iron Mountain between here and Cheyenne, that herd's well above objective. If a producer called and reported damage, then yes, they would be eligible for that damage compensation. The way that this bill is written, though, they would still fall under our rules and regulations that outline the procedure for notifying the Department of Damage, working with us to try to mitigate it, and then following up with allowing some kind of access for harvest.
All right, I do have one question on that. So on page 4, if claimed or if the population estimate is, so it doesn't have to be, I mean, do they have to claim damage, or is it actually damage if the population is just higher than that objective established by the commission? Is that an automatic claim for damage?
So, Madam Chair, the way I envision this is that a producer would still need to call and report it as damage, but if it's over objective, it would essentially qualify under this for further compensation by the department. I think one of the important points that we worked through as the subcommittee is that this wouldn't then just become a program where the department would, at the end of the year, just automatically be issuing checks. It would still fall under our damage framework of reporting the damage, working with us to mitigate it, and then following through with the investigation and cooperating with us on hunting access, for example.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple observations on your example that you had there. You know, that's almost at the extreme end. Maybe those elk were on there for 2 weeks, maybe a month, and they moved on to National Forest land or BLM. They moved somewhere else. So that's kind of the far end of things. And when your example of the rancher might have the 4 pastures, and they eat the one pasture that they're resting. Well, that pasture in the rotation may be where they kick out in the spring. That's crucial to them. And the fall before, they all eat it all, So I understand that concept, because all the ranchers try to rotate their pastures and their numbers because the ranchers out there with cattle are the best stewards of the land. They understand their land. They understand their ranch. They understand what it can do. And they try to work with, that's why the 15% in the one meeting I was able to attend with it, all the ranchers said, we'll give the wildlife 15%, but when it gets too far into our pocketbook, then we're going to file a claim. So just a couple observations.
All right, I think we're through with question. Oh, one more. Representative Winters.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Chief King, in your presentation, you indicated that you use the range surveys by the NRCS, is that correct? How does that compare with BLM or Forest Service?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Winter, I'm not sure. I think that it depends. I don't know that the Forest Service or the BLM, I don't know what their standard procedure is for estimating AUMs on given pastures. I'm not sure what they're using, so.
Follow up. Go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, it's been my experience that the BLM and the Forest Service have made range surveys on all their properties. And some of them may be quite old, but they do have those. And that's what the ranchers are, their payments are based on that. So my question was, how does that compare with what the rancher has to pay versus what the game and fish would need to pay based on loss?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Winter, just for my clarification, so the way I understand this bill, this would be a payment for deeded or state land leases, but not a public land BLM or Forest Service lease. That's the way I've intended this or interpreted this. Is that your understanding as well, or are you looking, or are you asking about maybe using some of their methodology to estimate forage production on private land?
Well, Madam Chairman, it's if you got private land out there or state land, it's probably all pretty much the same. And so I would think any range survey would take that into account. And you have, because you have the same plant communities out there and so forth. So it should be pretty comparable, I would think. But that's why I asked the question, I guess.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Winter, I think that we could in time refine this. We gravitated towards the NRCS RAP program just because it's readily available. It's really pretty straightforward and it's been in place for quite a while. It may not be perfect in time. We could refine that whatever tool it is we use to estimate forage production and incorporate other methods from, say, Forest Service or BLM. But this NRCS tool looked to us to be something that, again, was pretty straightforward, reliable, repeatable, and something that was manageable.
All right. Oh, Senator Larson.
Madam Chairman, thank you again. Mr. King, so I think I just heard you, this program would only be used on private and state land. Is that correct? We're not considering BLM or forest range.
Madam Chair, Senator Larson, that's the way I've interpreted this, and I would just make sure that the committee as a whole would agree with my interpretation.
All right. Okay, we have one online, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was my question, was on the BLM issue there, because those are AUMs that are bought and paid for by a rancher based on the forage on that permit. So that's why I was wanting to make sure that this didn't get, extended over to there, because a lot of times the wildlife tend to congregate where there's the best grass, and sometimes that's on the BLM. So the permittee that owns that permit would see that type of damage, and that's why I was concerned that this wasn't going to spread to that, and I think you've kind of answered my question on that.
All right. Thank you, Representative, for being patient with us. All right. I just want to check with staff and make sure that we're interpreting that right on it wouldn't extend to the Forest Service or BLM in this bill.
Madam Chairman, the way that subsection C reads, it just applies to landowners, lessees, or agents. So I don't believe that it would apply to BLM land.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Representative Winters.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to thank Representative Davis for bringing up his points because it refreshed my memory as well. I think the main concern here for us and for the rancher and for all agencies that are involved here is the condition of the range resource out there. And if we don't consider the BLM or Forest Service or whatever, as to the amount of damage that's occurring there, it's going to affect the whole range resource out there. And so some way or other, we need to understand that we may be paying the rancher for the use on his private land, but at the same time, that use is being made on the BLM and so forth, and so it affects the whole range resource out there. And so I wondered do you folks have range specialists on your that work for the Game and Fish to where they could be involved in some of this to enhance the whole management program?
Go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, Representative Winter, just to be clear, the BLM and the Forest Service has their own range program. They manage their lands. We do not. We do, however, have terrestrial habitat biologists who focus their work on both private and federal lands to try to improve range conditions. They work across the board, do a wide variety of work. For example, we spend a lot of time and effort on invasive grass species work, and that work can be done on both private lands and state and federal lands. But just to clarify, the Game and Fish Department does not manage, or we're not the active player in Forest Service and BLM rangeland work. That's entirely their house and not ours.
All right, follow up.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. So do you coordinate with these other agencies as far as your wildlife? If there is damage out there, do you coordinate with them to determine whether you need these elk or deer or whatever need to be reduced?
So, Madam Chair, Representative Winter, that is a good question, and that leads into highlighting the importance of our management objectives. So all of our big game herds have management objectives, and those objectives take into consideration both the biological realities, the carrying capacity of the habitat they're in, as well as the social concerns that are out there. And those objectives are set in a way that those herds should be managed towards what the rangeland can sustain and what the public, through public wildlife policy, wants that herd to be at. And so those kinds of considerations are incorporated into our management objectives. Does that answer your question?
Okay, are we good? There's a hand up online again with Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to be clear here. So if I heard you right, Director King, you manage the elk for the state of Wyoming, right?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Davis, that is correct.
Okay, so the elk, Madam Chair, Director King, the elk don't seem to know the boundaries between private and BLM and state lands. So I think we may be opening up a can of worms here with these other permittees, whether they be in the forest or the BLM, for this compensation. I think we need to look at that a little bit closer here, because I can see in areas where the herds are blossoming that they're running on the BLM in the wintertime or the forest in the summer, and these good ranchers are paying for those AUMs that the elk are consuming. So I think we're looking at maybe we need to really think about this, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. Representative, do you have a comment back? No, all right, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. King, this is a little redundant, but I just don't understand if you have a ranch that has private, federal, Forest Service, state, how you cannot consider the forest in the BLM. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Can you comment on that? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think that there certainly are scenarios where a pasture could include federal lands as well as deeded lands. I think it would be fairly easy for us to calculate the percentage of federal land in that pasture and subtract that out of all the equations that we just went through, that hypothetical example, and strictly just compensate for the loss, the estimated loss on the deeded acres within that pasture.
All right, Co-Chairman Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just was gonna maybe try to add a little color to this discussion about the BLM versus Forest Service and why we structured the bill the way we did. So BLM in particular, for example, you pay on actual AUMs used. State land you do not. State land you pay on available AUMs, whether you use them or not. In private, in theory, is the same. You have a mortgage or whatever, you have a fixed cost. BLM you do not. And so we felt like we would, if you're not running livestock on BLM, you actually aren't losing any money because you're not paying it out. And so we felt like we would be compensating people for a loss that didn't actually exist, at least not on paper. And I think that runs into some constitutional problems if we're compensating people for a loss that didn't actually happen. And so that's why we left BLM and federal lands in particular out, because you pay at a different level or under a different scheme, whereas on a state land lease, you pay the same whether you use it or not. Once you've paid the lease, your annual amount is the same, whether you have 100 cows or 0. But BLM's not that way. And so that's why we were just worried about, I in particular was worried about the constitutional issues we might raise by doing that.
Thank you. Go ahead, follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Co-Chair Craigo, that helped quite a bit. I'm still a little bit confused on the BLM or the Forest Service. You are paying, in the sense you used, they wouldn't be paying a grazing fee. But if you do have cattle on there, you would be paying a grazing fee to the BLM. So there would be damages there. So were you referring to if you didn't have a lease on a BLM or Forest Service lease?
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator, so let's just take kind of an example. For example, if you have a pasture that runs let's say it's all BLM and it runs 100 cows, but you don't run any cows in there, that costs you $0. If you run 100 cows, it's going to cost you the BLM rate $6 or whatever it is, plus if you have a surcharge, but whatever the $1.35, whatever the figure is, you're only paying for what you actually use. Is there going to be elk damage to that? And are you possibly going to be able to graze less cattle? Yes, that is true, but you're not actually paying something out. Whereas on these other circumstances, you're paying out whether you use it or not. And so that was the different schemes on the back end creates a different result. And that was what I was worried about.
Okay, Representative Slagle.
I would just add a different light to that, because in our part of the country where we lease the BLM, it's more like the state land. We pay the lease whether we use the land or not. And so there it would be the same if we included the BLM land in our bill here.
Okay.
So.
All right. Any further questions for the Game and Fish Department? Seeing none, thank you. And if you would stick around in case we have questions when we work the bill, we would sure appreciate it. So we will open it up for public comment now. All of you who wish to comment, please come forward. We have 2 microphones, so if you want to station yourselves at both of them, that would be just fine. Welcome, Mr. Magagna.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'd first like to express my appreciation to the committee and for the ability to work with the task force on developing the legislation you have in front of you today. It was good to be engaged, particularly comforting to see the way that we were able to find a lot of common solutions working with the game and fish, with our industry and also with the members of the task force. The second point that I would make, I don't want to repeat anything that's already been discussed, but the other point I would make is that this piece of legislation needs to be looked at in the broader context. Is this the answer to excess elk populations? It is not. It is a tool to recognize the financial impact of excess elk populations, either because there's too many elk or because they exceed population objective. But it will only work, and I believe it will work, if it's used in combination with other aggressive methods of elk population control that the Game and Fish has recently embraced rather strongly. I would say I wish they had embraced them many years ago, but we are where we are, and I do think we're making some progress in that other area as well. So I think that's important. Beyond that, I would just attempt to address a couple of things that were brought up here today. The 150%, maybe a landowner perspective on the 150%. And that is that, let's say I have a piece of private land that has 1,000 AUMs in it. I have a lot of choices. I can harvest those AUMs with my livestock. I can bring in someone else's livestock. I can decide to graze it with 500 head of cattle for 2 months, or with 100 head of cattle for 10 months. Those are all the decisions, the flexibilities I have, whatever will produce both the best return for me and best manage that resource that's out there. I can rest it. That's the other option. In the case of the elk, I don't have any of those objectives. The elk come on when the elk come on, not when I feel I'm comfortable having the forage harvested. It may be before the cattle, it may be after. And so the 150% as opposed to a regular payment is, from our perspective, is a recognition of the fact that this is sort of forced grazing. I'm having AUMs taken away from me that I have no control over how those are being harvested, as opposed to a lease I negotiate with a private party where I can specify all the terms and conditions that go with that. The other point I would mention, the issue came up with regards to federal lands, and I would concur totally with the explanation given by Chair Crago. And you may recall when I first brought the concept of this piece of legislation to this committee at your meeting in in Torrington, I intentionally did not include the public lands for a couple of reasons. One is what has been explained, that under most normal circumstances, you pay for what you use, so you wouldn't be paying for these. The other is the concern, am I deriving a financial benefit from a piece of private land that I'm not entitled to because I'm not grazing it, I'm not harvesting it? And then the third one is that not all, but some of the private or the public lands are utilized by more than one permittee on an area, and it becomes really difficult to deal with that. I would bring up, I think Representative Slagle brings up a valid point, primarily in eastern Wyoming. There are two types of BLM lands in the state. There are what are known as Section 3 lands, which you have a permit to graze and you pay for what you utilize. Then there are Section 15 lands, which are deemed leased lands. And in most cases under those, it's true, they're smaller parcels that are located mostly in the eastern half of the state that are handled in a different manner. And in that case, you do pay whether you utilize it or not. So I would leave the door open on that, whether Section 15 lands, to be equitable, should be included or not. But certainly on the vast majority of the public lands in the state, forest and BLM, our position would be that they should not be included as being eligible for payment here. With that, I would just offer our strong support for this bill as it stands, and our appreciation for the committee moving forward with it, and would urge you to continue and go forward with it basically the way it's been presented to you at this time. Would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Any further public comment? Come on forward, Mr. Moline.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this bill. I think this is head and shoulders above the bill that we looked at in Torrington, simpler. I'm willing to give it a try to work. I think we're going the right direction. As was mentioned before, this is a tool. And I think it's gonna have several incentives in it, both from the landowner and from the game and fish. And the landowner is going to give the incentive to actually document, keep an eye on what's happening to take these claims forward. But I think one of the big things it's going to do is going to give the game and fish department an incentive to keep these herds down to the objective. I'm willing to give this a try. We can always come back and revisit it. You know, let's give it a try. One of the big things is that the private land grazing fee, I appreciate using that and that it's up to date. Because an AUM of grazing 2 years ago, that grass was a lot more valuable than it was this past grazing season because there wasn't any. And I do appreciate the 150%. I think that's a good place to start. And in essence, sit in support of this bill. Let's give it a chance. Let's go forward with it. The big proof is going to be when the landowners put in claims, because that's been one of the complaints is that they can't get paid for them. You know, some of the other things are easier to get paid. The grazing land, the range land, it's been harder to actually get paid for that. I think this helps. I'm willing to give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll have to come back and go farther forward. With that, Madam Chairwoman, I would sit for any questions you or the committee may have for me.
All right, any questions? Questions, seeing none, thank you to the
Thank you.
Farm Bureau. Any further public comment on this piece of legislation? Anything online? Nothing online? Seeing none, we will close public comment and we'll go back to the committee. Senator Kolb, did you have? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just had a question probably to the Game and Fish, and it was the diversion of funds that they're currently experiencing for the compensation they're currently paying. What are those funds they're using, and what else could they be used for?
All right, well, we'll bring the Game and Fish back up to answer
Madam
that
Chair.
question. We know we've got them on standby, so if you wouldn't mind coming on up while we work the bill as well, then we'll just have you at the ready. Go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, Senator Kolb. So just quickly, a brief 101 on game and fish finances. So our revenue is derived almost entirely from license sales, application fees, preference points, conservation stamps, all of those type of products that the Game and Fish sells. We do also receive a chunk of money in federal excise tax on sporting goods and ammunition. So that's our revenue. Our damage program is provided for out of that revenue. It's currently we're spending about $1 to $1.5 million a year. And as we mentioned, this program certainly will add to that. So our budget covers again everything, all the expenses, all the projects that Game and Fish does is all funded and almost entirely through us and our license sales and through some grants. And so we'll make the adjustments in our annual operating budget to make sure that we can pay for these damage claims. Does that answer your question? No.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No, I meant specifically, okay, you got a pot of money, you get a Pitt Roberts money, whatever be the case, you got a pot of money and you do many things with that money, but beyond paying compensation for damage. My question is or my statement first is that's going to take away from the other things you could do with your money, right? You're going to have less money to do other things that aren't compensation for damage. What I'd like to know is the money that if you didn't expend this money, right? If you didn't expend, $1.5 million, probably 2 million. If you didn't expend that money, what would you do with that money? If you would repurpose it because you wouldn't have that expense. I'm trying to understand what we're losing here on what you do normally that's beyond compensation for damage. That's what I'm trying to understand from you what that means to you. What you're not going to do a program, those kind of things.
Chief, are you clear on the question?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think so, but I think it's difficult to answer. So let's just ballpark this and say it costs us an additional $1 million. That $1 million could be spent in a lot of different ways. Is that going to take away from a program? Could that take away from money that we might put towards habitat improvement? Absolutely. Could that take away money that we may use to pay salaries or buy equipment? Absolutely. Our commission is in a position, though, that they've managed their funds very conservatively. We have funds that are set aside for projects as they come available. Certainly the loss of this money that would be paid out into a damage compensation program does mean something else won't get done or won't be funded. But what that is, that again, annually on an annual basis, as the commission looks at our budget and they make the priorities for where the department will spend their money, we'll have to address that on an annual basis.
All right. Are there any further questions before we move forward? Okay, seeing none, we have closed public comment and the committee is different than the public. So if we have other questions as we work the bill, that's just fine. However, I would entertain a motion on the bill at this time.
I move the bill.
Moved by French. Seconded by Schlegel. And so discussion on the bill. Well, I would entertain amendments right now. Representative Allemond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You know, this is not something that just now sprung up on us. This has been gaining for 30, 40 years. And this may be a little harsh, but the Game and Fish has had 30, 40 years to take care of this problem. Hasn't been taken care of. So I'm going to put an amendment in that may be a little different than what we've thought about before, but I think we need to try something different. And my amendment would be on page 4, after line 13, insert Roman at number 4, and it would read, the Game and Fish Department shall distribute unlimited lethal take permits to all landowners in any area where the number of elk or overpopulation objective set by the Game and Fish Commission. The landowner shall have the right to hunt or distribute, buy or sell, and take the lethal take permits to a person of their choosing. All elk killed will be processed by humane and human consumption. The hunting season shall begin August 1st of each year and April 1st of each year until the elk population in an area reaches the target objective. The Game and Fish Department shall receive $20 for each lethal tag permit used. The lethal tag permits may be used for any elk. I think this is needed.
Okay, let's see if we have a second before you explain. Okay, it's been seconded by Larson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this is needed, folks. These people in many areas of the state, especially Area 6 and Area 7, they've been devastated for years. They've cut their cattle herds. Some have went out of business. And I understand that there are a few people who like the elk. This will not affect them because the elk will be on their private property and will not be harmed in any way. Thank you.
All right. further discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Senator Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too agree with this amendment. I kind of would wonder if we could put it up on the screen so people could actually read it. Might be helpful, but I'm not sure if they have that.
Do we
a
have the
possibility.
ability to do that? We'll check in with staff for a moment. It looks like we had a thumbs up. Okay, there is the amendment on the screen. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Go ahead.
I think this is vital. There are ranchers out there that just have too many elk on their property, and I don't see how the Game and Fish is means. I mean, they've been trying for a while. I know they're going to go and try harder, but even if they put out a couple hundred head, they're just multiplying too fast. They can't get ahead of them, and this gives the incentive to those landowners that are being harmed really, really bad, a chance to try to take care of the situation themselves. If they have a neighbor that seems to be protecting their the elk herd kind of as a refuge, well, then they'll have to try to get them when they come over on their property. But I think it's a good idea.
All right. Thank you, Senator Larson. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I as well support that amendment. I'm not a big elk hunter. I just have a question maybe for whoever it applies to, the bringer of the amendment. Does that window of August 1st to April 1st, is that different than what it is existing right now? Thank you.
Representative Allemond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not sure what it is now. I think most seasons start August 15th. These gentlemen would know. But the reason I put it this way is I don't want people out there while these elk are calving. You know, we want to get rid of elk. We want to kill elk. But we got to do it humanely. And I don't want people out there running around shooting at them, killing the mother and leaving the baby starved to death. Don't want that. And that's why I put those dates there. Thank you.
All right, Representative, do you want to check in with the department and see how that works? Do you have an answer for that, Chief?
Madam Chair, so currently in our regular season setting framework, we have seasons that run from August 15th to the end of January. However, under our depredation seasons and our current lethal take permits, we have exercise permits that are closer to those dates. We've had some July 15th to March 15th. Is that correct?
March 1st.
To March 1st. So fairly close to those dates.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Senator Ide?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to complicate anything, but I think the longer the better in this bill. For if we're trying to thin these out, I think that this should be as long as possible. So I don't know if the bringer of the bill, I don't want to mecca, or your bringer of the amendment, I don't want to mess this up, but you know, you said July 15th to March 1st or something like, or I guess this does go out to April 1st. So yeah, I won't make an amendment. I think it's probably a good number. Thank you.
All right, Representative Allemond.
Madam Chairman, I would like Chief King's idea on this, and just to make sure, I do not want to be out there weaning calves, you know, we'll get them later. I would like his input on this, on these dates.
All right, Chief King, if you could comment on that, and also maybe while you're doing that, talk about what you're doing with regard to lethal take in the area right now, the area of concern.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, on dates, under our current depredation seasons and lethal take permits, we've authorized lethal take permits to begin as early as July 15th, and we've ran those to March 15th. So these dates are fairly close to what we've been doing. And just to reiterate, our outside of the regular hunting seasons, we've implemented depredation seasons where we're able to craft a season specific for individual landowners or groups of landowners. We authorize a number of licenses that are then provided to those landowners or anybody that they want to provide permission. Those licenses are purchased through the Game and Fish Department and authorized for an established, agreed upon season and location. In addition to those depredation seasons, we are issuing a number of lethal take permits. Those are permits that are issued by the Chief Game Warden and approved by the District Game and Fish Commissioner. Very similar to what you already have up there, with the exception that those permits can't be sold. And I think that's an important distinction to make, and I can follow up on that in a minute. But the depredation permits, we refer to those as Chapter 56 permits. We've been issuing a lot of those this fall. So for example, we'll issue an individual landowner a Chapter 56 lethal take permit for 15 elk. They can utilize whoever they want to harvest those elk. There's no cost to them. They're provided a donation coupon that covers the transportation of that carcass. They can donate it, or whoever harvests the elk can take it home. We are implementing those broadly across the state. We've been implementing those in the Iron Mountain herd. We have about 30 landowners so far that have participated in that. I bring that up because I think what you're proposing here is essentially being done, with the one exception of selling those permits. And the one caution that I would bring forth on selling permits is to be cautious about the incentive that could provide. Transferable landowner licenses has been discussed many times. And when that is discussed, one of the primary concerns is that you could incentivize having more elk and creating more problems, because if you are able to sell that license to the highest bidder, the person purchasing that license wants to have the opportunity to harvest the biggest and the best, and that means harboring more elk. And so my primary caution on this is to consider the unintended impact you could have in incentivizing the wrong thing. And then just to reiterate that the department is currently doing nearly all of what that amendment proposes in our lethal take permits.
All right, Representative Almond, then Banks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It might make for a bigger problem, but it will be the rancher's problem. And it will be the rancher's decision at that time whether he wants to run cattle or run big elk. That would be his decision and not ours and not yours. And that's one big reason I like this, because if it would allow him to another option, whether he wants to run cows or shoot big elk. Thank you.
All right, Representative Banks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I think that there's a couple of things we could tweak in the amendment. I like the idea of it because of the option that it gives us. Well, I think it's great that the Game and Fish Department is going forward with more lethal take permits and these depredation tags. That's great. But we need another option, because frankly, when I speak to some of these people, they don't have a lot of trust in what the Game and Fish has done over the past while. They need another option to go forward because they've had time, they've had years to address this problem, and obviously it hasn't been done. So great, let's bring forward these new lethal take permits. Let's have more of them, but let's have this as an option on the table also, so we can get rid of some of these elk where they're a problem on the rancher's property. That's where we need to address this and give it into the rancher's hands, where they have the ability to do that and not be restricted so much of being limited to however many depredation tags that they're allowed to at that time. They can manage that as a viable option, so they keep their livelihood where they need to have their livelihood. So going forward, I think I will support this amendment and work on how we can make it make improvements to it and add it to this bill. Thank you.
Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chair. to Representative Alman, would you clarify, are you saying they can sell those? Or is it just, okay, I get lethal take from Game and Fish for whatever number when they're over objective, and I can give it to my friends or whoever comes talks to me? I didn't think you said that in your amendment that they could be sold. Would you clarify that, please?
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator French. Yes, they can be sold. They will be the property of the rancher. And whenever one of those coupons is filled, $20 will be sent to the Game and Fish. And only when they're filled. The rancher can go out and shoot 50 elk if he wants. He can't sell the meat because that's federal. But if he's hungry, he can eat all 50. But they must be processed for human consumption. They're not to be laying out there. But yes, they can sell, they can give them away, whatever. The intent of the bill is to give them whatever means they want to dispose of the elk.
All right, did you have a follow-up? Okay, Co-Chairman Craigo, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I just wanted to talk to the amendment just for a second here. I'm not opposed to taking additional steps. I'm just not sure we want to do it in this particular bill because I'm afraid of how it's going to jeopardize the success of this bill, which is one tool that we have in the toolbox. Could it be an individual bill? Could it be its own separate bill, just the language you propose, which you actually put time in to craft? That would be my suggestion, is don't amend it into the current bill that we now have before us, that we've worked to get something workable, not only with the department, but with stock growers that we think's doable. My fear with the amendment is then we make the bill untenable and unable to get through the legislative process when we get to session. And that's my fear, is I at least want to have something when we get done end of March. I want to have something that we can take to the producers back home and say, this isn't the last step, but at least we've done something this year. We've accomplished something in the interim for you. It's not perfect. There's some more steps out there, and maybe this could be an individual bill that you bring during session and do the same thing. Maybe we do both, but I just think we should separate them out and not try to put it into this bill. And so that's why I'd urge a no vote on the amendment. Not the idea, just the amendment in this bill.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Representative Conrad.
Madam Chair, can we call for question?
Yes, we can. I would like to comment a little bit before we do, if we could. And it looks like Representative Davis had something to say as well. So we'll go to Representative Davis first, and then I would like to speak if you wouldn't mind before we do that. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam
Representative
Chairman.
Davis.
This is directed to Director King. When did the lethal take permit that you're talking about, has that just been a recent development in the Game and Fish to use this tool? Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought this tool hadn't previously been available, but now it is available. That's question
Go ahead,
one.
Chief.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Davis, that has been a tool that's been available to us for a long time. It's provided for in statute and in commission regulation, but our increased use of that and expanded use of that has just been in more recent years, where we have been much more liberal in authorizing those permits to address our elk management challenges.
Thank you.
All right.
Madam,
Do you have a
Madam-
follow-up?
Yeah, Madam Chair, my follow-up is, if the Game and Fish is currently using these tools that are outlined in this, do we want to be, as legislators, in charge of operating and managing our wildlife here? I think we better leave the tools in their hands. They understand what they're doing. That would be and so I probably will not vote in favor of the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. All right. So considering, continuing our committee discussion, I have a couple of comments. And one, I think that we might even be violating the one subject per bill because we're almost actually authorizing another hunting season and a take when we had a bill to compensate landowners for extraordinary damage to rangeland. And so I think we might be, as we've sat and discussed all of this, I think we might be on the fringes of that, if not kind of going over, because it's not a compensation piece. And I think it's two separate subjects to compensate landowners, the game and fish, and then to create this way to manage the wildlife, basically. And so I'm wondering, Representative Allamond, if we wouldn't want to separate this out into a separate bill. I am amenable to either, if the committee wants to sponsor this and move it forward and tweak it and work it through the process, I'm fine with that. If you want to make it an individual bill, I'm fine with that as well. It would be up to this committee whether they wanted to sponsor that legislation. Again, I would remind you, it will take a majority of both bodies in order to do that. So I would just put that out for your consideration. I will be a no vote on the amendment. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Is what we're talking about, is it getting rid of elk, or is it, I thought that was our main objective, not compensating landowners. I thought our objective was to get rid of elk, which the bill that I amended is trying to get rid of elk, and my amendment's trying to get rid of elk. And I thought that was the purpose of this bill. And I think that my amendment makes this bill much more palatable and easier to pass than without it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative. I guess we'll go ahead with the question then. So all those in favor of the Allamond amendment, please raise your hand. And we'll let staff decide if it is a majority or not of both houses. Have you got that count? Okay, let's do it separately. The Senate, if you are in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. That's 4 senators. To the House, if you are in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, have you got that count? And then the Senate, if you are opposed, please raise your hand. I guess it's just me. House, if you are opposed to the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, and do you have those counts, Katie? Could you report them to us, please?
Could you speak up on that one? I can't hear that vote count. Yeah.
Yep, could you tell us the vote count and then
I had four ayes for the Senate and 4 ayes for the House. 5 opposed on the House and 1 opposed on the Senate.
okay, so that fails because the House did not pass. All right, so that amendment has failed. Are there any further amendments? Go ahead, Representative Allamond.
May I run that, Madam Chairman, may I run that as a separate bill now?
Not right now. We're dealing with this bill. And when we finish this bill, if you want to move that as a separate bill, we can entertain that motion then, but we're dealing with the bill before us and the amendment has failed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, further amendments, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Maybe as an effort, in an effort to kind of allay some of the fears out there. Page 2, line 13, where it says compensate any landowner, add in front of lessee, compensate any landowner or state lessee or agent, to clarify that it's state lands they're leasing, not the BLM and the Forest Service and that, just to kind of clarify that.
Thank you, Senator French. Is there a second on that amendment? A second on the amendment. Do I have a second? Seeing no second, that amendment dies for a lack of a second.
Madam Chair,
Okay, okay, seconded by Ide. So go again, Senator French.
Just to clarify, we've been talking about, is it BLM involved, lands and compensation, Forest Service, federal lands. On page 2, line 13, compensate any landowner, state lands lessee or agent, just adding state lands lessee, just to clarify that it's private land and state land lessees.
All right, and we've got a second from Senator Ide. Is there discussion on the amendment? Co-Chairman Crago.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I guess, and maybe we could propose a friendly amendment, but by putting the word state land in front of lessee, we're excluding people who are leasing private land, which currently under the bill would also be eligible for the damage payment. So if it possibly, instead of saying state lands lessee, it could say state land or private land lessee.
I'm good with that.
Okay, is the second good with that friendly amendment? Okay. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment has passed. We are back on the bill. Are there any further amendments? Representative Winters?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I have an amendment which would occur in section 3, page 4, after line 16. And the LSO people have the wording. Do you want them to produce that or do you want me to give it?
Katie, are we able to put that on the screen? No, that's all right. Why don't you just read it to us? And we will go from there, Representative. It's on
Okay.
page 4 after line 16. Oh,
Yes.
Anna, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah,
Can we
it's-
take one small break? Anna needed to speak with us for just one moment. If you could hold for just one moment, go ahead, Anna.
Madam Chairman, I can read the amendment if you'd like me to, Representative Winter, or you can do it. It's up to you.
Please.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So I talked to Representative Winter about this amendment. He would like to create a new section 3 after section 2 on page 4, which basically says the Game and Fish Department shall develop a plan to reduce the elk population in every area that is over objective and report the plan to the Joint Travel Committee and the Agriculture Committee by September 1st, 2024, or at the last meeting of the 2024 interim. Does that make sense?
Did that make sense to everyone? Does everyone understand the amendment? And that was your intention, Representative Winters? Okay. All right, any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Oh, it's been seconded. Sorry about that. Thank you, Representative Banks, for seconding that. And is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has passed. Last call for amendments. Go ahead. First Representative Larson, then we'll go to Cole. Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, I don't know where to put this in. I'm guessing on line 16, but I really do think we need to. Page 2, yeah. include BLM and forest when in use. Because they are losing feed out there to the elk that they're anticipating to use on for their cattle. So I'd like to put it in there. I would like some help maybe from LSO, but
All right,
in-
Anna, do you have a recommendation maybe where that would go?
Just off the top of my head, I haven't had a whole lot of time to think about this, but maybe after agent on line 13 on page 2, you can put or lessee of US forest or BLM land or something to that effect.
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead, Representative Larson.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. I agree. I think that'd be great. I would like it to read, we're on line 13 after agent. Is that what we were looking at?
Madam Chairman, Senator Larson, yes.
I'd like that to include also BLM and forest leases when in use. Forest Service.
Okay,
lands
so
when in
Representative
use.
Larson on line 13 after agent or lessee of US Forest Service or BLM land when in use.
Correct.
Okay. Does everyone understand what we're voting on? Or talking about, discussing? Is there any discussion? Any discussion, Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess I'm confused on how we have any control over BLM or Forest Service lands when it comes to management of some animals on those lands. The BLM lands are public lands. So I don't know what we can do about that. I mean, we're compensating for something we have no control over. So that's my confusion.
All right,
Thank you,
Senator
Madam
Kolb. Any response to that, Senator Larson? All right, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kolb, to kind of refute that a little bit, back to my question when I didn't understand, why we didn't include those and in this amendment, I think makes it as if you're, if they're paying a fee for grazing on Forest Service or BLM, that, you guys manage the wildlife and that rancher, has no control over that, whether it's private, state, federal, Forest Service. So I'm just looking at it simply, if you have a big ranch with a fence all the way around it and you've got all 4 of those ingredients in that cocktail, they're all getting effectively the same. So I don't know. I'm in favor of the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ide. We'll go next to Chairman Eklund online. Good to see you, Chairman Eklund.
Thank you, Chairman Steinmetz. So sometimes when we start working these bills, this is a huge problem in certain parts of the state. We're trying to deal with something fairly specific here. And all this bill is doing is kind of taking a bite at the elephant. And if we start trying, I think the subcommittee was trying to limit it down to something that would be palatable and could possibly pass. And if we continue you can amend things to make them better. And that's what we're trying to do here. But sometimes you amend them to death. And this could be one of those times when we need to leave it alone and solve one problem at a time. I know that the leases for BLM and Forest Service are very much affected because they're also more than likely going to be private landowners, and the damage by the elk will affect their grazing, and we're trying to work that into this bill. It's harder to do because you've got land that's public land, and I guess I would like to see us take a little caution as to how much we want to amend a bill. This is one of those amendments that doesn't begin to cover the problem we're trying to cover with the amendment. Again, it might be better on a separate bill, but those are my thoughts on it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Eklund. We appreciate your insight. I do want to go to the agency and just ask the department, how would you implement that, or what would that look like if you did have to implement that?
Madam Chair, to be very frank, I think that then makes this almost untenable for the agency for us to wrangle with that. Forest Service and BLM lands are very different. They're multi-use landscapes that provide for multiple purpose, grazing being one, wildlife use being one as well. And so I think it becomes very, I'd have to put some more thought into it, but contemplating paying for elk use on public land is not something that our damage program has ever considered, and is very far outside of the realm of the current damage statute.
Thank you for that. And that would be why I'm unfortunately going to be a no on this at this time, just because we've done a lot of work on as far as we've gotten right now. And I feel like when we start extending this, we haven't done the research and the work to actually know how this would work. How could we do it? How could we implement it? How could we make it work? And so, or if there are any federal programs for this, or if I need a lot more information before I could vote on this. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but I would just need a lot more information. So with that, I'll be a no on this and try to keep this bill a little bit cleaner as we go into session. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Representative Schlegel, then Winters. Oh, Winters. Thank you for raising your hand. I have trouble seeing around everybody sometimes, so go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd have to speak against this amendment just from the fact that grazing use on these from these federal agencies is going to be regulated by those agencies, and any loss that the rancher might realize would be from not being able to run enough livestock on it. There would be no monetary loss to them because they wouldn't have to pay for it. So I just have to speak against the bill, the amendment. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
The amendment has failed. Back on the bill. Is there any further amendments? Seeing none, we will call the roll. Go ahead. Did we have a further amendment? Go ahead, Representative Cole. Did you want to have further?
Cole's not here,
or
but Senator Cole's here.
Did you want to have further discussion on the bill?
Just before we call roll call vote.
All right, go ahead.
I would like to state the reason why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote.
Go ahead. That's fine.
Madam Chair, I'm opposed to this bill. I'm opposed to a solution that pays people off instead of dealing with the core problem. But the core problem is we haven't managed these elk herds for a lot of reasons, but I don't believe this is a solution I could ever support in any way, because it doesn't solve the problem. All it does is pay folks off that have the problem that isn't being managed. So I just don't think that's the right way to do it in my mind. So I'll be a no vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there any other further discussion on the bill? Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Madam Chairman, I agree with Senator Kolb. I think I'm against this bill. I think they should have included the amendment I wanted before, but I'm gonna be against it.
All right. Thank you for that, Senator Larson. With that, please call the roll.
Madam Chairman, this is roll call for 24 LSO 0114, excess wildlife population damage amendments as amended. Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Hicks, excused, Senator Ide,
No.
Senator Kolb,
No.
Senator Larson,
No.
Representative Allemand,
Yes.
aye.
Aye.
Representative Allred. Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
No.
Representative Davis,
Aye.
Representative Slagle,
Aye.
Representative Winter,
Aye.
Chairman Eklund,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Steinmetz,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Crago,
Aye.
We'll wait for a vote total and then we'll announce the fate of our bill.
ten aye, 4 no, 1 excused. But it did fail in the Senate, so.
Right, that's what we were waiting. The Senate failed. That's what we observed, but we needed an official tally. So the bill has failed. We will not be proceeding with this bill. And that doesn't preclude anyone from bringing it as an individual bill. Okay, Representative Allemand.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I bring my bill back at this time?
Yes, you can make a motion that the committee sponsor your amendment as a bill.
I move that this committee sponsors the amendment I put in as a standalone bill.
All right, and would we be able to have that amendment displayed again, just so that the public online can see what we're talking about and so that our committee knows? Thank you, Game and Fish Department. We appreciate all your hard work on that bill. And we'll see if anything else comes of it. Thank you very much. All right. So we have that displayed online. Do I have a second for the committee to sponsor this as a bill? Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Senator Larson is the second. And then we will entertain discussion on the bill. Go ahead and Representative Allemand or Banks, whoever, if you want to explain your bill, we've had a lot of discussion on it, but since you did make the motion, you would be first. And then Representative Banks, you could go next.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, Madam Chairman.
It's been a long day. It's all right.
Yeah. And I'm flustered, so we've got to do something. And I think this is a pretty good standalone bill. I thought it was a good amendment when I brought it forward as an amendment. It will do something. It may not put an end to the problem, but it will bring it a long ways down the road, I believe. And I had a lot of push that, yeah, it needs to be a standalone bill. Well, now it is, and I urge you to vote for it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Allemand. Before we go to you, Representative Banks, we have staff with their hand up. So let us see what they have to say.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I think it's important to notice that the public hasn't had a fair opportunity to look at this bill. There's really been no notice of it except for maybe 20 minutes ago. So there are those issues, and generally we don't do this regarding creating a bill at the last meeting with no research or peer review or anything like that. It's just not something that we typically do, just so that you're aware of that.
Thank you, Anna. I understand. We will see where this takes us. Thank you very much for that staff comment. And I hope that everyone will take that into consideration when you take this bill into consideration. Representative Banks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One of the things I'd like to see and addressed in this bill is one of the issues that the Game and Fish Department brought up. It's something that I have issue with too, is the ability for the landowner to sell these coupons or to sell these tags. With because of the same concerns that they brought forward. How are we not gonna start another issue of now these are $10,000 tags on this property? And now instead of getting rid of the elk, they're breeding up these big bulls for these trophy hunts. So I'd like to, if it's the committee's pleasure, put something into the bill that prevents the sale of these coupons or these tags if we do decide to go forward with this as a bill.
Further discussion? Go ahead, Representative Allemond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm looking for a way to get rid of elk. I don't care whether we sell them. I don't care whether we give them away, as long as we humanely kill them and process them for human consumption. That's my goal. I don't care whether we sell them. I don't care whether we give them away, as I said. I don't care whether the rancher eats 50 of them. All I want rid of is these elk so that these ranchers may prosper. Thank you.
All right. Is there further discussion, Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to use the recommendation that the Game and Fish talked about for extending the season, because it's a little shorter the way it's currently been presented. It seems like we could get another month, start earlier, July 15th, than the August 15th. And I don't see how that makes it worse. They said they do that currently. So I think if we make the season as long as humanely possible, according to the Game and Fish's recommendation, I think that's our best move with the length of season. So I'd like to have that be considered. I don't know if we're going to try to move a bill today. Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking
That's
about?
our last chance unless we vote it down and it becomes a personal bill. And, that is for your consideration as a legislative body, how important it is for you to weigh how long the public has had time to see a committee bill. And that is the thing that we have to weigh as legislators. If you feel this issue merits moving forward a bill that the public has not had up as long as Anna had mentioned. We had been working on a totally different issue, which was landowner compensation. That's what we began in Torrington. And so now we've changed the flavor of the bill completely and are looking at actual, basically a lethal take bill prescribed by the legislature is basically what we have before us. So go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So my next follow-up question is there a possibility of an online Zoom meeting to extend this conversation? Or are we just going to say today is the day to say this is a bill or not a bill with the considerations that you had just mentioned?
Thank you, Senator Kolb, for that question. Actually, we do not have the bandwidth to have another meeting because of the room rates in Pinedale and in Cody for some of our meetings, but it wasn't, I don't think we went to Cody, it was Select Water, but because of our meeting in Pinedale and the hotel rates there, we were actually over budget and had to request $5,000 more. 6,000, I think, is what we request. 5,000 is what we were short. We padded it a little bit by $1,000. And so we're actually over budget already. There is no bandwidth for another meeting. And I'm not sure that any of us have the scheduling time at this time either, because many of us serve on several committees, as you do as well. So those are all considerations for each of us as we make the decision on this bill. So I had heard some amendments floating around before we started this discussion. Are there any amendments on the proposed bill?
Madam
Go
Chair,
ahead.
could we get the
Representative.
bill put back up so we can kind of see where to fit things in?
Could we resume that bill? Get it back back online. All right, there you go. And maybe staff could email it to us as well so that we have it before us on our computers and then we'll
So, Madam Chairman, if I may.
go ahead.
I think the best place to put that probably would be in the third line there. The landowner shall have the right to hunt or distribute. And then put in there, but not sell the lethal take permits.
Okay, is there a second on that amendment? Seconded by French. Discussion on the amendment. Go ahead, Representative Allamond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You guys are gonna love this. I'm gonna support this amendment for the simple fact that I think it's gonna make it a lot more palatable for this committee to be able to vote aye on it. So I do support this amendment.
Okay. That being said, is there any further discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Folks, this is our last chance to help these people in this area. They haven't been helped for 30 years. It's time that we help them today. And this is the start to doing that. If we don't do it today, it's going to be another year and a half before we look at this bill again, probably. So I would ask your vote aye on this bill, and let's get this done for the people of Wyoming in these devastating large elk herds. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, I would request a roll call.
That's a couple of members who.
Oh, where did they go? All right, we'll pause for just a moment and until we get our people back. We're going to take a 10-minute break, a bathroom break, get all our members back to vote. Thank you. I do want you to come back. You cannot leave and go home. So 10-minute break and we'll be back in 10. All right, we'll call this meeting back to order. Are we online, Katie? All right. So I will remind us all, we're running a little behind schedule. We have the regulatory reduction task force bills also to get to today. So there's about 3 bills standing between you and home, just saying. All right, so we're back to roll call on are we titling this bill, Anna?
Madam Chairman, elk population reduction.
Oh, and co-chairman Crago just reminded me, we are on a new bill. So if there is any public comment, we would take that at this time. This is not a part of the previous bill. We took public comment on this issue. This was an amendment on the previous bill. So since we have initiated a bill draft, we will have public comment. Is there any public comment on this bill? Seeing none, public comment is closed. We will now take roll call on this bill.
Madam Chairman, this is for an unnumbered bill request, elk population reduction. Senator French.
Senator French.
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks excused. Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Representative Allemand. Representative Allred. Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad. Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Slagle.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
No.
Chairman Eklund.
No.
Co-chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
Co-chairman Crago. That motion failed.
All right, the bill has failed. Could we have the totals, House and Senate?
5 ayes in the Senate. 6 noes. Five ayes in the Senate. 3 ayes in the House. 6 noes in the House.
Okay,
One
so the bill
excused.
has failed. Okay, so I guess we are Senator French.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to reconsider 24 LSO 0114 excess wildlife population damage amendments.
Thank you for that, Senator French. However, did you vote on the prevailing side? All right, go ahead, Anna.
Madam Chairman, I spoke with my colleagues and that restriction is only for during session. Outside of session, anybody can vote to reconsider.
That is wonderful. We have learned something new. So we have a motion to reconsider. Do I have a second? Seconded by Co-Chairman Crago, moved by Senator French. And a motion to reconsider is non-debatable. And so we will take a voice vote on that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
That motion has passed. The bill is up for reconsideration. Is there any discussion on the bill? Go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Madam Chairman,
Oh, Now we have to move the bill, sorry. So that was just to reconsider. Now we have to move the bill. Before we have discussion, moved by French, seconded by Crago. Now Senator Kolb.
Madam Chairman, can we amend said bill?
Yeah. it's just basically a bill again.
All right.
Same bill we had.
Then I would propose an amendment for a sunset date of 2030 on the program.
All right, we can probably just stick that on the end of the bill. And remember, could we take up the bill as amended instead of having to go back the bill that failed as amended? Would that be, is there any objection to taking the bill in the amended form the way we had it with the Winters Amendment, with the French Amendment that had passed? Is there any objection to that, to start from that place? All right, without objection, we are working the bill that we had amended with the amendments passed, and now we are adding a sunset date from Senator Kolb, and please reiterate that sunset date.
Madam Chair, July of 2030. July 1 of 2030.
July 1 of 2030, this bill would sunset. Is there a second? Moved by Kolb, seconded by? I'll second that. Oh, seconded by Ide. Okay. So is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion, Representative Allemond? No, not on, okay. All those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. That amendment has passed. Representative Allemond.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I urge a yes vote on this bill. We've got to do something for these folks. I would have rather liked to have gotten done with a two-pronged approach so that we had more than one thing in our toolbox, but that wasn't the cards for today. But I do urge you strongly to please pass this so that we can help these folks. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, I want to thank you, the committee, for the good discussion on this bill. I'm glad that we reconsidered it with all the subcommittee work and the department work. And so I would say, Katie, would you please call the roll?
This is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 0114, excess wildlife population damage amendments as amended. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks, excused. Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
No.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Representative Allemand.
Aye.
Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
No.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Slagle.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Crago.
Aye.
That passes.
That bill has passed. Thank you, committee. And Representative Allemond, I hope that you will get your bill drafted up so that we can, I hope you will get your bill drafted up, Representative Allemond, so that we all look forward to seeing it at the legislative session. Thank you. All right, next up, we have our regulatory reduction task force bills. And Chairman Guru is joining us online, I certainly hope anyway. And we welcome you to the Ag Committee, Chairman Guru. Is he online?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm right here.
You're doing great. We took a little longer on our discussion. So welcome to the Ag Committee. Would you take us through your first bill on dairy marketing? And if you don't mind, we'll take them one at a time and have the agencies come up as well. And Anna has assured me that if you need any staff help, she's there for you. But as the good chairman, we know that you can handle this task. So you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you,
Mr. Co-Chair, and it's good to see Chairman Eklund and all of you today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciated the last discussion. As the chairwoman just said, or Madam Chair said, it was a great discussion, and I appreciated listening to it. I come to you today as the co-chair of the Regulatory Reduction Task Force, which is a 15-member committee. My co-chair, Representative Nicholas, sends his regards, and I'm been assigned this task today. The task force is made up of 15 members, 6 members of which are legislators, and 4 of them, 2 House and 2 Senate members, because they're sitting amongst you today. Representative Davis, Representative Conrad, and then of course, my friend Senator Ide and Senator Cole serve with distinction on that committee, along with folks from the Department of Agriculture, Mr. Miyamoto, who's with you, Department of Environmental Quality, and the State Fire Marshal. Also, folks from the public who are appointed by the governor from agriculture, mining, oil and gas, construction, business, and local government. Our objective, of course, was to reduce onerous regulatory burdens in Wyoming to foster economic growth. We chose 3 subjects to study: agriculture, energy with mining, oil and gas, and housing. So today's bills come from the agricultural subcommittee and have been vetted by the full committee, and on a unanimous vote, were passed to you. When the Management Council gave us this task, they gave us the task to produce legislation, but we can't sponsor to vote on it. So we are at your door to ask for your sufferance and ask for your support on these 2 bills. Bill number 1, which you have in front of you, is the Wyoming Dairy Market Act repeal, which is LSO 2004, I think version 2. And in your packet, you see a very detailed memo from Director Miyamoto, who I know is with you. And so basically, all this does is this act is repeals the Wyoming Dairy Marketing Act of 1971, section 11336-101 through 110. And the effective date is July 1st. And this act is superseded by federal regulations, is no longer necessary or applied by the Department of Agriculture in this state. And the bill furthers the goal of the task force, which is to eliminate onerous and duplicative regulations. While not a large step, it was a first step in this task. The group is just kind of getting its legs under it right now. And this was kind of the low-hanging fruit that was brought to us by committee. And so with that, I will stand for any questions on the bill. And I'm sure with Director Miyamoto at my side, I'm sure that we can answer any questions that you have.
All right, any questions for the good chairman? Questions? Seeing none. Director Miyamoto, do you have any comment on the bill?
Madam Chairman, again, Doug Miyamoto, Director of the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. Not much to add here. One of the tasks of the subcommittee was to look at regulations that we had on our books that hadn't been used or were no longer relevant. This was one of those that we identified and brought forward. Any specific questions, we would be happy to help with. I have our Justin Latham, who is he's the manager of the Consumer Health Services Division, with me today and would be able to answer specific questions on the Dairy Marketing Act.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Any questions? Questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will entertain public comment on this piece of legislation. Any public comment? Public comment? Seeing none, committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Cole. Do I have a second? Seconded by French. Any discussion on the bill? Discussion? Amendments? Senator Cole, did you have discussion?
Oh, no, I was ready to vote, Madam Chair.
You're ready to vote. All right. Are you calling the question?
I'm calling the question.
All right. Question having been called, we'll take a roll call vote on this bill.
Madam
Good little
Chairman.
bill.
Madam Chairman, this is roll call for 24 LSO 0204 Wyoming Dairy Marketing Act to repeal. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks, excused. Senator Ide. Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Excused.
Representative Allemand.
Excused.
Excused.
Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Excused.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Davis,
Aye.
Representative Slagle, Representative Winter, Chairman Eklund,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Steinmetz,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Crago,
Aye.
4 ayes in the Senate, 2 excused. 7 ayes in the House, 2 excused.
All right, thank you. The bill has passed. Chairman, you're up with the next bill on the flow through pools.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I bring you LSO draft 20205 flow through pool exemption. This too came from the Regulation Reduction Task Force, and the bill draft exempts flow through pools from Public Pool and Spa Health Safety Act. That's statute 35-28-101 through 110. Basically, this bill allows for, actually the impetus of this bill is that the current administrative rule exempts pools like the pools in Thermopolis, flow-through pools that really can't be regulated by state regulations like a hot tub or a pool. They fall in a different category. So it just seemed duplicative. And so we're eliminating that. And once again, I know that you've got a memo from Director Miyamoto, and this also came from his office, and was also approved unanimously by the board, and be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any questions for the chairman? Questions, Senator Cole?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't know if this goes to the director or not, but I just had a question about the bill, and as it explains the definitions of flow through pool, and it ends by saying of water to maintain adequate quality. And my question is who determines that statement, adequate water quality? And how is it determined? I'm concerned that if, say, an animal died upstream and it's flown into a pool, and what is there as a safeguard to the public to kind of make sure that the statement here can be fulfilled? And that's my question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Cole. Director, back to you. Go ahead and answer that question. And if you have any other comments on the bill, we'll go to you next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator, the protections in place, the flow through pools are so specific to their individual locale. So if you have animals that have died upstream, those are all, natural water bodies that are typically protected for primary contact recreation to begin with. We do have fingers on the pulse of different conservation districts in the DEQ that take surface water quality samples throughout the year. And if they have exceptionally high E. coli counts or some other water quality parameter that is way outside the norms, then typically you would let the local jurisdictions know, and they would post that as such. The way that the flow through pool statutes read is that we have water quality standards for public pools and spas, and anything outside that realm in terms of pH or other water quality parameters, then that you would not be in compliance with the public school pool and spa regulations, and we would inform them as such. And that's hard to achieve with the flow through pool statutes the way they're written now. So we would find ourselves a lot of times writing exemptions from that.
All right.
Follow-up.
Thank you. Follow up.
Madam Chair, Director, how often are they required to test in these situations for the water quality? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Director, or whomever. Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, we don't test water qualities on these. They're flow through pools. The sanitation is what we exempt them from. So we can't test the chlorine or bromine levels in those facilities anyway. So there is no water test conducted on them for sanitation.
All right. Thank you for that. Any further questions for the chairman or the department? Did you have any further comments from the department? Are you good to go? let me, if we never got to go to his comments, so if we could do that, then we'll go to your questions, Senator Ide.
Madam Chairman, I'm good.
You'll defer? Okay, go ahead, Senator.
Just real quick, thank you, Madam Chair. Would you just briefly describe to the body here, or the panel, the difference between an artificial and a partially artificial pool? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman. So a artificial is man-made constraints or refines such as concrete walls that would create that body of water where the flow through would flow into. We do not regulate anything that's naturally occurring. So if there were hot springs that were naturally occurring, we don't do an inspection on that body of water.
All right, are you good? All right, any further comment from the director? Nothing. All right, any further questions? Okay, I would entertain, first we'll do public comment. Is there any public comment on this bill? Public comment? Any online? Don't see any online. Okay, we will close public comments. And back to the committee, is there any discussion or amendments on the bill? Discussion, amendments on the bill? Seeing none, we will call the roll. Anna? Oh, I would entertain a motion on the bill. Moved by Schlegel. Seconded by Banks. It's been moved and seconded. Now we can have a roll call on the bill, unless you guys have discussion or amendments. Okay, it's the end of the day. We're ready to go home. And so let's do roll call on this bill. I bet our batteries died at the end of the day. So thank you for adjusting to that. And a brief pause never hurts anything. We're ready to go whenever you are.
Madam Chairman, this is roll call for 24 LSO 0205, flow through pools exemption. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks, excused. Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Senator Colb's not to speak up, soft eye.
Our batteries are dying as well.
Senator Larson.
Excused.
Representative Alaman.
Aye.
Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Schlegel.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Crago.
Aye.
13 aye, total 2 excused.
All right, the bill passes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we will see you down the road.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Director. Appreciate you being here. All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda items, which brings us to general public comment. If there's any members of the public that have general public comment for things that we have not covered yet today. Co-Chairman Crago, do you have a visitor you'd like to introduce?
Madam Chairman, I do. My daughter Lily, who's a freshman here at the university, is sitting out there in the audience, probably dying to give public comment, I'm sure.
Well, I see her nodding in disagreement with you. And so we appreciate you coming to hear the end of our meeting, and it's good to meet you and welcome to the Ag Committee. So you can go home and know that your dad was actually at work. All right. So seeing no further public comment, we'll close that. Is there any discussion from the committee? Discussion from the committee? Seeing none. I want to thank everyone for a successful interim. Thank Chairman Eklund for his mentorship as I being a new chairman and his mentorship to co-chairman Crago here. We really appreciate you and look forward to the time when you can be back with us and wish you well in your continuing treatments. Chairman Eklund, do you have any comments to close out our interim committee meetings?
Well, I really miss all of you, and it's good doing it in a Zoom setting. I'm not quite up to traveling around very much. The treatment's going well. I'm finally in treatment, and hopefully we'll get better and can come and do what I really love doing, and that's mixing with you and the public and the people that are involved with our legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you'll be in our prayers as you continue to overcome this in this battle. So is there any further discussion, any comments from you, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just thank you to the committee and for all the hard work and the discussions we've had over the last couple meetings and the good discussions we've had in debating what makes good policy and what doesn't. And that's what makes this a great process. We're all working together and we all have different ideas, but we can talk about them and get to a common goal at the end. So I just thank everybody's work on that. And I especially thank the Chairman Eklund I've been chatting with him on the side and I wish him well. And I hope he gets better soon because he needs to get back in this seat. So we'll see you soon, Chairman.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't thank our great staff who hauls all of our equipment and keeps us in line and reminds us when we didn't move a bill. We really appreciate all of you guys. And we look forward to working with you this legislative session. So thank you so much. And with that, we are adjourned.